Welcome back. So we are going to hop right into the second round sleepers section. We're going to go into some of the draft picks that are going to fall into that potentially late first round, but mainly the second round, and sort of the sleepers going into the next season in the future. And some of the criteria we're basing these sleepers on are guys that are going to provide instant impact to playoff teams, and also guys that can manage to stay in the league for a lengthy period of time. I mean, 6, 7, 8+ years. We want guys that are going to be solid NBA players for a long time to come. So, Davis, why don't you go ahead, kick us off? Give us your first second round sleeper.
All right, so I'm going to start this with a riddle. So, do you know which player had the highest field goal percentage in the nation last year at 74.4%
Is it?
for college basketball?
Is it? That's no.
I'll
No,
spoil it
it's a
right
center,
here.
but no.
Yeah, so Udoka Azubuike out of Kansas.
Oh boy.
So, okay, everyone knows Devon Dotson out of Kansas and how impactful he can be at a second round slot. A lot of people already have him kind of projected as one of those second round sleeper type of players. But Udoka Azubuike, in terms of a Kansas fan that has watched every single one of their games over the last 13, 14 years, he is one of the most talented players that I've ever seen. And, a lot of the reasons why he didn't enter the draft last year was because he was a lot heavier than he should have been. And he got pretty gassed running up and down the court. But, he addressed a lot of that over the offseason and, was a guy that was able to stay on the court throughout the duration of the games and wasn't a liability in terms of, his hustle. But as I already mentioned, he has the highest field goal percentage in college basketball history. But not only that, he's a defensive juggernaut that can bully dudes down low. He's definitely a traditional center. He's not one of those guys that's going to be able to knock down quarter threes. That's for dang sure. Um, but he's a prolific dunker, which is you can expect that from any center. But you know, his skill set with his left and right hand, being able to finish around the rim and make those down low post moves is truly remarkable. And, I think any team will be excited to pick him up just for his, explosive energy off the bench and what he's going to be able to bring on the defensive side of things. But once they kind of start to see, if you even shoot the ball at a ridiculously high percentage from three, he's going to scoop those up and he's going to put him back just about every time. And so, he's a guy for me that I think can be providing instant impact to a team like the Celtics or any team that really needs some type of center help or just someone off the bench that can, get the job done on a tough defensive assignment whenever their big man gets in foul trouble. And so let's see. I guess we're doing three sleepers each. So do you want to go back and forth or you want me to go through with my other ones?
We can go back and forth.
All right.
So my first sleeper is Cassius Winston.
Oh, that was one of mine. All right. All
Haha.
right.
And the reason why, and as I'm sure you know, just because you have him on your list, but I mean, he was a 4-year player at Michigan State. Um, Absolute floor leader there, Michigan State. He's a great 3-point shooter, and I think he can really carve out a really good bench point guard role for an NBA playoff team. I know I've seen in a couple mock drafts that I've been kind of filtering through over the last couple of weeks. A lot of people have him going to the Lakers like super late in the first round, and I think that'd be beautiful.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Especially because there's been a lot of talks of Rondo potentially leaving, and they've kind of been um, trying to find someone to fill that role for them. And I know a big deal for them is finding really, really cheap guys to fill up that bench. And I think he'd be a beautiful, beautiful pickup there. I think he could really run that second unit for them. I think he's an NBA ready player. And I think he's going to be in the league for a long, 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 long time. I think he's just going to be a great, fantastic bench point guard.
Speaking of fantastic bench point guards, let me transition or hop right into like a bunny. into my next pick. So I'm going to go with Marcus Howard out of Marquette.
Okay.
Talk about a prolific scorer in his NBA or in his college basketball years at Marquette. I mean, he averaged 30.1 points a game, and definitely was the heart and soul of that Marquette team. But he is a guy that is able to knock down any type of shot on the court, and has a motor to kind of embrace that six man type of profile that we see from a lot of those type of guys. Obviously, the biggest concern and why he's not higher on a lot of draft boards is that he's only 5'11". He's 171 pounds, so he's not a guy that's physically gifted or vertically. He's a little vertically challenged in terms of what the NBA kind of comes to expect. But also, I'm just curious because I was a little puzzled by it whenever I Googled it. So, how tall do you think Cassius Winston is? Because whenever I watch
Six
those,
three,
he's 6'1", but
6'1". Okay.
whenever I watch those games when he was at Michigan State, I swear that man was like 5'7". He looked so tiny on the court. I don't know why. I don't know why I thought that, but I definitely thought he was a lot smaller than he is. Granted, 6'1" is not huge, but still. So let's hear who your second pick is.
Yeah, so I actually have another guard in this list. For whatever reason, I kind of found like this year's draft is just like really guard heavy for
A lot of
whatever
good
reason.
guards. Yeah, yeah.
And so my next one is Peyton Pritchard
God, that was my other one.
out of
Okay.
Oregon.
He's a sniper.
I'm just stealing them today for sure.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, a lot of what I said about Cassius Winston, I think these lengthy college guards that are there for 2, 3, 4 years really develop those floor leader skills. And I think that's what NBA playoff teams are just finding extremely valuable off the bench. I mean, for example, like the Celtics, Brad Wanamaker, I mean, he's carved out a perfect role there. I mean, he really fits that need of that backup point guard, and every team, especially playoff teams, are really, really going to be looking for a guy that can do that. And so, again, just kind of what I've been saying about with Cassius Winston as well. I mean, they both are good shooters, and I think they're both. I mean, without going too much in depth, I just think they're both going to be really, really have really long careers in the NBA as these backup point guards on playoff teams, and really provide a lot of valuable experience there.
Nice, nice. I definitely like Pritchard out of Oregon. He's one of the more dynamic players in this draft class. And we'll see how he kind of is able to transition his game. And so, since all my picks have been stolen, I'm going to go with one of the easiest sleeper picks. And you'll see in a little bit why that is. So, it's Killian Tillie out of Gonzaga. He's a big man, a 4-year player out of Gonzaga. But in terms of what we saw from him at the college game, he's a big that is able to stretch the court, knocking down 40% from three off 90 attempts. He, averaged 13 and a half points a game. But, he's the reason why he's a sleeper for me is that the only reason he's in the going to most likely be going in the second round is because of his injury issues that he's had last year. They're serious issues. He's had knee surgery, a torn ligament in his foot, stress fracture in his ankle, sprained ankles, hip pointer, all sorts of different injuries. But the man has lottery. He has lottery talent for sure.
Yeah.
And so, that's why it kind of seems like, a safer second round sleeper. But, a lot of that is purely dependent on him staying healthy. So we'll see what he's able to do, and if he's able to stay on the court. But, as a 6'10" center that's able to stretch the court, play really good on off-ball defense, and has a knack for the playmaking as well. I would just love to see him stay healthy. But, that's a pretty big question mark for him. So.
Yeah, so my last sleeper pick, a bit of a different one. There's a lot of questions I have about him, but he has one really unique aspect of his game that I think could really allow him to provide instant impact to a playoff team and then potentially extend his career. So that guy is Cassius Stanley out of Duke, and I think it's just his superior athleticism. He's arguably the best athlete in this draft. I mean, broke Zion's vertical record out there at Duke, which is by no means a small feat. And I just think for him, I think what he can really bring to a team outside that athleticism, but it's just that defensive mindset. I mean, what team doesn't want an athletic wing to go out there and play defense, another body to throw, especially in the playoffs? I mean, we always see in the playoffs like a lot. It's just it comes down to sometimes about just tossing bodies at the other team's best player and just try to keep those guys fresh and really try and slow down that guy. And I think that's someone that's going to be really valuable for an NBA playoff team that's looking to try and add some defenders off the bench. I think for Cassius Stanley, improving the scoring a little bit. I really like that he kind of plays off ball almost exclusively. I think that's something an NBA team's going to find a little valuable. It's not someone that needs the ball a lot, and it's going to allow him to focus a lot more on defense. I think Cassius Stanley is someone that can really sort of mold into a lockdown defender. I think that athleticism is just so crucial for him, and I think he can really utilize that to just become a phenomenal defensive player in the NBA.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Carey because I was actually wanting to talk about how this year might be the first year in a long, long time how Duke might not have a player go in the first round.
Yeah.
Which is wild to think about because both Vernon Carey
Trey
and
Jones.
Cassius Stanley, Trey Jones, like they're all guys that had first round potential but didn't kind of live up to it. And, from my quick research, I think the last time that Duke hasn't had a first round draft pick was in 2008. But since then, I mean, they've been absolutely like,
Killing it.
I mean, we know it's Duke basketball.
It's
Like they
Duke.
always have boys that go, whether it's, Zion, RJ, and Cam last year, Marvin Bagley, Wendell Carter, and Grayson Allen the year before, Jason Tatum, Luke Kennard, Harry Giles the year prior, Brandon Ingram the year before, Jahlil Okafor, all dudes that are just like lottery, like juggernauts, like potential coming into the draft. And like, I don't know, as someone that, I'm very outspoken about Kansas basketball. But like, I don't know, I have a lot of respect for what Coach K does out there, but, being able to, kind of compete as much as they did last season without having, some of those high flying draft picks is just cool to see from Coach K.
Yeah, and I think this season in college basketball, which is so unique. I mean, we're seeing a lot of these just high talented high school basketball players not commit to these big schools, the Dukes, the Kentuckys, the UNCs, and some of them still do, but these teams aren't as good and elite as they want to be. I mean, this year, it was like I swear every time a team jumped to one seed, like the first seed, they lost. Like every time. And
Yeah, no,
so
this was a wild basketball
yeah,
season.
and we had so many players go overseas. I mean, LaMelo, RJ Hampton. I think we're going to continue to see that push. And I think a lot of these high school players are starting to realize, like, hey, I don't necessarily need to go to Duke, Kentucky and improve my game that way. I mean, I can go to whatever college I want that I feel more comfortable at, not necessarily a school that's historically been an elite basketball college. And I'm still going to get drafted in the first round. I'm still more likely than not going to be a lottery pick. And I think that's something we're going to continue to see here in the future. A lot of these players not necessarily gravitating towards the Dukes, the Kentuckys, and that sort of route, and kind of going to maybe a little bit more smaller colleges. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that sort of plays out going into the future.
Yeah, and kind of building on to that a little bit, we've also seen more and more players kind of go into this whole new G League system,
Yeah.
especially like top prospects, which I think is really cool to see because, a lot of these guys that are, guys that are for sure going to be going into the lottery, there's not a big reason for them to, play a year at college just before declaring into the draft. So I like that there's now that the NBA is now offering, a type of path for those type of players since they're not letting, high school players just go right into the draft like they used to. There's still a way for them to, be getting all the, tools and skill set and being paid by, these G League affiliate teams while they have, the NBA development, like coaches and, like tools and support around them. I think that's something that's going to continue getting bigger and bigger until, college athletes are going to be getting paid more and more. So, that's a conversation for another day. But I do think this whole G League route for a lot of players is going to become more and more attractive. I mean, especially now that, one of the potential number one overall picks outside of Cade Cunningham for the 2021 class and Jalen Green, I believe. And he went into the G League, program as opposed to one of those top college basketball systems that he was also considering. I think that's just going to open up the idea for a lot of other recruits that are going to be, kind of looking to find their own way, especially, guys that aren't, married to the idea of going to college basketball. And, someone like LaMelo that, played overseas instead because of his affiliate, or not his affiliation situations, but like his eligibility situations. There's just going to be, I'm very excited to see how, if the G League can just become like a lottery player, like all-American, just pool that can be really, really fun to watch and could, like, I don't know, take away from some viewership from college basketball. Because, I mean, people are going to want to watch these high profile players before they go into the league. And so, we've seen the success of, some of the summer league type of stuff that the NBA has been able to put together over previous years. And so it'll be interesting to see once they get more and more of these players, how they're going to be able to market that whole system to try to get more people to, tune in and watch those games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, this just puts, and it's going to continue to put so much pressure on the NCAA. And they're going to have to find ways to incentivize players. And if they don't do that, I think we're going to continue to see this movement of players moving away from college basketball and taking alternative routes. And I think that's going to be a really big deal for the NCAA. And it's going to, I think we're going to end up seeing them, especially in our lifetime, if not within, I expect it within the next 5 or 10 years, they're going to allow players to start making money. And I think that's only fair for these players because how else can you incentivize them? They don't want to go to most of these players, if they know they're going to go to the NBA and I feel like for most players, like in high school, if you're going, and why waste your time on classes? Go to the G League, go make money. And you're actually preparing yourself for that, for the best league in the world. So I definitely think it's going to be really interesting to see how this continues to play out over the next 3-4 years. Cause I think that's really, if we continue to see this movement go into the next few seasons.
Yeah, for sure. And I do have one more quick little trivia question for you.
All right.
So do you have any idea who the G League MVP was last season?
I know I've heard his name. I feel like I've heard his name.
So I'll give you a hint. He is from Kansas.
Okay. Oh. I think I should know this.
He's on the Bucks affiliate team, if that helps.
I've heard his
name. Not that we watch a lot of G League basketball.
G League, of course. I know I've heard his name before too. Oh, come on.
He was a college Naismith Player of the Year, if that helps.
I'm trying to rack my brain for all of them. I don't know. Who is it?
Frank Mason, baby.
Oh, I knew it. Oh, Frank Mason III.
Which is interesting because, when you're looking at Devonte Graham, obviously this is just a Kansas boy talking about Kansas players at this point. But Frank Mason kind of paved the way for Devonte Graham and kind of gave him the reins in college. And both were guys that, stayed around in the college game for multiple years to, continue to help their draft prospect. But from what I saw from both players, Frank Mason had a lot more going for him coming into the NBA than Devonte Graham did. And so now that, they're both kind of starting to find some success, yes, at different levels, But I mean, let's think back to last or 2 seasons ago before Devontae Graham kind of had this potential Player of the Year award. He was kind of on fire in the G League as well. And so now that Frank Mason has kind of been able to sustain that same levels of success and been, the MVP of the G League, I'm excited to see if, not that the Bucks really need a dynamic point guard at this point. We'll see what they end up doing. Frank Mason's very short. But it'll be interesting for me to see if, Frank Mason can also take some type of big leap and be a potential next big thing in the guard
The
position.
next big thing. All right, but with that, let's go ahead and go into our next break.